As I'd come home with next to no money from my painful, fruitless tour, my phone and electricity were soon shut off. Before long, I was cooking up my daily batches of crack to sell on a small old Coleman propane camping stove and shooting dope by candlelight at night. I still had a pager. One day, I received a page from Lane. I walked across 9th Avenue to Harborview Hospital to the grimy, germ-covered payphone at the bus stop I always used but hated to touch. I wiped off the receiver with the sleeve of my shirt and called him collect. "Hey man, I heard from somebody that the cops are looking for you. Something about stolen property. Keep your head down." I asked him where he had heard it, and his answer was a bit vague, but the story nonetheless gave me pause. After Lane's warning, I stayed in my bathroom all day and night waiting for customers. I'd turned the buzzer off long before because not only did those street people I'd foolishly given my apartment number to harass me around the clock, I had run into Christian so often while meeting some shabby crackhead at the front door that it was way too obvious. Now I told them not to shout up at me anymore, but to throw a small piece of gravel up to get my attention. Early one morning, I was nodding on the couch when there was a knock on my door. "Seattle Police Department, open up." "1 minute," I said, thinking, "God damn it, you idiot. He told you they were coming." I scrambled to get up and flush what I had. Halfway through the bedroom, I tripped on a chair and ate shit, hitting the floor with a huge resounding thud that reverberated throughout the place, badly fucking up my knee. After flushing all the drugs I was holding, I limped back to the door. With the chain still hitched, I opened the door an inch or so. "Mark Lanegan?" "Yes, that's me." "My name is Officer Davis. I'm coming in to have a chat with you." "What about?" As if I didn't know. "Listen, pal," he growled through the crack in the door. "If you know what's good for you, you'll shut the fuck up and let me in." After several long moments of hesitation, I unchained the door. One solitary uniformed officer strode in, straight past me. He peered at the crack pipes and spoons on the table I hadn't had time to clean up, and the mound of used syringes on the floor in the corner, probably 2 feet high. "Sit down," he said. "I'm going to take a quick look around." Officer Davis stuck his head into the other room where Cyril was out cold, face down on the bare mattress. A dirty mason jar half filled with bright red balloons of heroin sat in a large flower pot alongside a huge rotting cactus near his head. The cop looked back over his shoulder. "Is he dead?" "No, sir, just asleep." He pulled up a chair and sat across from me at the coffee table. "I'm not here to bust you for whatever you guys are doing up in this place. I'm here to talk to you about a stolen laptop you pawned a couple weeks ago. I just need to get a statement from you about it. Because Rob Chandler is a friend of yours, I'm not going to hang you up on this. Instead, I'm going to give you 2 options. Either go to rehab and get yourself cleaned up or leave town. If I find out you're still here or out on the street, I'm going to make what happened in San Francisco seem like Disneyland." Rob Chandler was a longtime friend, the owner of Capital Loan, the pawn shop where I sold stuff, borrowed money, and used the phone daily. The cop stuck a piece of paper in front of me. "I want you to sign this statement, then I'm giving you a week to get lost. Either rehab or leave town, I don't care which." I sat there listening in silence. Without reading it, I signed the piece of paper he'd put in front of me. Without another word, he stood up and walked out. After the visit from the cops, things went downhill pretty quickly. I felt eyes on me everywhere. Unable to deal crack and not wanting to leave town, I attempted to go to rehab. With my health insurance from the Musicians Union, I checked myself into a grim detox facility in the Ballard neighborhood, northwest of the city. After about 30 minutes, I knew I wasn't going to stay. I said, "Fuck this," out loud to nobody, put on my clothes, and slipped out a back door. I called Danny Baird, who was functioning as my manager by that time. He came and got me in his old Ford pickup truck and drove me back up to First Hill. The first of the month was coming. I didn't have rent and was plagued by a rotten wisdom tooth and an infuriating infestation of lice. I stayed until the eviction notice was put on my door. Then I left with just the clothes on my back. Everything of value had already been sold or traded for drugs. I spent some nights on a couch in a house occupied by some impressionable young guys from my hometown of Ellensburg. Other nights I crawled under a dingy blue tarp I had fished out of a dumpster and slept in an overgrown bushy area next to the freeway, populated by homeless people and addicts, known as the jungle. I sold heroin on the street for my former all-night connection, the agoraphobic black dude named Val. With his throwback processed hair and old-school-style nylon shirts and flared trousers, he looked like a parody of a 70s blaxploitation pimp. He lived in the Yesler Terrace projects nearby on First Hill and rarely, if ever, left his pad. After my wake-up shot in Val's bathroom, I would head off the hill with some heroin to sell downtown. Every day after I sold out a product, I would stop at Nordstrom's department store and steal a bag of tube socks. I would tear the tops off to use as bandages for the huge, gaping, self-inflicted wounds on my forearms. I would use the bottom part as intended, a covering for my filthy, aching, open blistered feet. Once, while standing on a street corner with my mouth full of balloons, I heard someone say my name from inside a passing car. I had told myself no one would ever recognize me in my current state, skeleton thin with huge beard, long dreaded hair, and greasy, unwashed clothes, still sporting the leather pants I'd bought in Europe, the only pair I owned, but someone had. I was wary of cops in the best of times, but was now hyper-vigilant in case Officer Davis might make good on his promise to catch me out. I kept boosting and moving batteries and started getting my dope from a huge 40-something ex-con, a New Yorker named Donnie, who lived directly across the street from my old place. He'd gotten convicted on an armed robbery charge and spent his 10 years in the New York State prison writing poetry. He nicknamed me Red. I enjoyed hanging out with him, primarily because he would always share his Marlboros with me. They were 1,000 times better than the rollies I smoked, always made out of butts I collected off the sidewalk. An hour earlier, Donnie had just re-upped and was walking down the street with a small canvas bank bag full of heroin in his pocket when he noticed a police car slowly following him. He'd cut behind a fenced-in building site and, out of their view for an instant, tossed the bag over the tall chain link and barbed wire. Seconds later, they turned the corner, hit the lights, and got out of the car to shake him down. Not finding anything, the cops had to let him go. Now he needed me to climb over and retrieve the dope. We walked the quarter-mile or so back to the unfinished building in the dark. After a couple tries, he managed to throw his long black duster over the wire, then hoisted me up onto the 12-foot-high fence. I almost got hung up and sat shakily straddling the top for a minute, temporarily unable to get my leg to the other side. "For fuck's sake, Red, get on with it." I swung over and climbed down a couple feet. Then my cold fingers lost their grip on the rain-wet chain link, and I fell 8 feet the rest of the way down. I picked myself up off the muddy ground and quickly located the bag behind a large pile of 2x4s. Easy money. The instant I picked up the bag, a bright white motion sensor floodlight came on. With a howl that sounded like it came from the depths of hell, a huge Rottweiler came galloping out of the shadows. I tried to sprint for the fence, bit ass on the slippery ground, and fell backwards in the mud. Here was not death, but deformity. This dog would chew my face off. At the last possible second, the Rott snapped back on a heavy chain attached to its collar, snarling and snapping at the air, its jaw clicking like a dry-firing pistol just inches from my face. "Jesus Christ, throw me the bag," Donnie hissed. I ignored him, stuffing it down the front of my pants instead. I'd be damned if he split before I got out and was paid in dope for performing this wretched task. I picked up a wooden pallet, leaned it against the fence, and used it as a stepladder to launch myself back up to the top and over. The next time Donnie sent me out to re-up, I made a desperate, foolhardy decision. I met Julio on the corner with the grand Donnie had given me, got the dope, and instead of returning to Donnie's, hopped on a city bus headed to the far side of Capitol Hill. I holed up in the house of some using acquaintances for a few days, sharing some dope with them in exchange for a bed. After a week or so, I ran into Patrick Connor, the younger brother of my Screaming Trees bandmates Van and Lee. Pat invited me to stay at the large house in the Central District he shared with some other kids from Ellensburg, a house I'd crashed in before. It was a huge, comfortable 3-story house. I slept on a couch in a closed-in balcony on the top floor, with my old piss-yellow corduroy stadium coat I still had from 1993 as a blanket, my only worldly possession left from my 33 years on Earth. Early one morning I was awakened by a loud disturbance. "I know he's in there, you piss ants. Get the fuck out of my way." I got up in a hurry, recognizing Donnie's robust, angry voice from the street below. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Pat's roommate Adrian. "He's not here, mister. Get off my property or I'm calling the cops." Then all four of the kids who lived there started yelling. "Yeah, man, get lost. The cops are on their way. Get out of here, mister." How had he found me? I'd been careful to never tell him about the place. Well, find me he had, and now I was deep in the shit. His big, booming voice tore through the crisp, still morning air. "You fucked the wrong guy, Mark," he was now shouting at the top of his lungs, using my real name for the first time ever. "You fucked the wrong guy. I see you, motherfucker. I know you. You're dead, Red. You're fucking dead." I descended after I was sure he'd left. The guys were visibly shaken. Turns out they had stood together in a line to prevent him from getting into the house. Donnie was not someone to be fucked with. I'd once seen him mercilessly beat down a large, tough-looking homeless guy who had spit at him. And though it was illegal for a felon, he kept a pistol under his mattress. At long last, I was face to face with the dilemma I'd been desperately avoiding forever. I was 33, but looked twice as old. I weighed a skeletal 165 pounds with huge open wounds on my arms. I had no money, no safe place to stay. I had burned every bridge from both ends and every church from floorboard to ceiling. I was the ghost that wouldn't die. As I stood shivering dope-sick on a corner, waiting for the inevitable hammer to fall, my mind went back to something that had happened months earlier. During my daily trip to Capital Loan to use the phone and pawn something, Rob had asked me to come into the back room. "Hey Mark, a weird thing happened yesterday. Courtney Love came into the shop and asked if I knew how to get a hold of you. She gave me some literature from a program in California that helps musicians with drug problems, puts them through rehab." "Fuck that shit. You can tell her to shove her rehab." Rob was a good guy, a family man with wife and kids, a successful businessman who owned 2 pawn shops. Now, with nowhere else to turn, I remembered Rob and what Courtney had offered, a way out. I trudged the long mile down to the shop, eaten up with worry I might run into Donnie or Val or Officer Davis now in the 11th hour, but I got there without incident. "Hey Rob," I called out to him the instant I made it through the door. "What was that thing Courtney left here for me?" He gave a little smile and reached under the counter and retrieved a thick folder full of information about the Musicians Assistance Program, MAP as it was commonly referred to. "I've been hoping for a long time that you'd ask about this," he said. I spent less than a minute looking it over. "Will they take me somewhere warm out of town?" I asked, the only thing I cared about. "Let me get in touch with them and see what the deal is," he said. In less than 10 minutes, Rob had me booked on a flight to Los Angeles the very next day, where the MAP people had a bed in a rehab for me.